everybody, and welcome. We have a great show for you today. This is the beginning of our Thought Leadership series for the Exceptional Women Awardees Foundation. And we are so delighted to bring you thought leaders from all over the world who are going to join us in this series. And today we have a very, very special one. She has literally changed the world with her ideas. It is Sally Helgesen. She has written 7 books, bestsellers books, which the Forbes has said she is the premier writer and author in women's leadership, and I heartily agree with that. In addition to that, she is the #1 coach for women in the world today. What an amazing accolade. And Sally is going to give us all kinds of insights. I can't wait to start the show. Let me introduce myself quickly. I'm Lorraine Siegel. I'm the chair, founder, and CEO of the Exceptional Women Awardees Foundation. Why did we start this foundation? Well, our mission, and we are here to help women rise in their careers, high-level, high-potential women. And the reason is that most of us, including me, never had mentors. I didn't have a mentor in my early career as a lawyer, as an entrepreneur, even as CEO of multiple companies, and then as a board director. And there are so many women who have walked the road less traveled in similar circumstances. And so our foundation enables them to rise in their careers. And so let's get right to it with somebody who knows everything about how to help women rise, and that is Sally Helgesen. Welcome, Sally.
Thank you, Lorraine. It's just a wonderful pleasure to be here with you and your network.
Thank you so much. Well, I am thrilled to show you. This is Sally's book. And why I'm going to show you another book is because Sally and I both met through Marshall Goldsmith. I wrote a book with Marshall Goldsmith called Partnering the New Face of Leadership, which we wrote after the 9/11 tragedy and donated to the 9/11 Victims Funds. And Sally has written so many books, but this is absolutely my favorite. And we're going to talk about this book today in particular. So Sally, thank you again for being with us. Now, let's get right to it. What led you to write How Women Rise?
How Women Rise is really about the behaviors and habits most likely to keep women stuck and keep them from rising and fulfilling their highest potential. What inspired me to write the book was I had been doing workshops throughout the entire century so far. And over, I would notice that certain habits seemed to keep my participants stuck. And I was really interested in Marshall's earlier book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And I thought his template was brilliant, that the same habits and behaviors that can serve you well early in your career can become a problem later in your career. But many of the habits and behaviors he focused on did not seem to apply to the women in my workshop. So I suggested to him that we collaborate, and How Women Rise is the result.
So Sally, can we just go back a little bit? Because by the time you were doing workshops, you were already an expert in the field. What was it that inspired you in your own life to start even doing workshops for women or leaders around the world?
I got interested in women's leadership very much through my own experience. In the 1980s, I was working in corporate communications, and I worked for some excellent companies, but it was very clear to me that they had no idea how to value women's talents and especially women's strategic potential. Not just myself, but the other women who were starting to come into the workplace. So I wanted to know what female leadership at its best looked like so that I could present that to organizations and hopefully change their perceptions and behaviors. So I ended up writing a book, doing some research into some of America's best women leaders. I would have done it globally if I'd had the budget. And the result was a book called The Female Advantage, Women's Ways of Leadership, published in 1990, still in print, and the first book to focus on what women had to contribute to organizations rather than how they needed to change and adapt. So organizations began calling me and asking me to do programs and to speak to women and work with their women. And I just thought, this is wonderful. So I went with it.
Sally, you're a one-woman industry. I love it. And you were so far ahead of your time. You really were. I mean, in the 90s, 80s and 90s, we were just fighting for women's liberation. And you were already thinking about parity in the workplace, which is certainly where we are today. Such a hot topic. And I love that in your story, that you've actually lived it as well as taught it, which is fantastic. So I know, because Marshall is a good friend of both of ours for over 25 years, that there are many of the Marshall Goldsmith 100 coaches who are live out there watching us today. Hi to all of you, and please put your questions in. Sally, your books are very good for coaches. How can we use them in our coaching work?
Well, what I've found is that coaches all over the world love How Women Rise, because it is so tactical and practical. It is focused on identifying habits that undermine women. Women resonate with this. Once they recognize it, then the book also provides real advice for how women can overcome these specific behaviors based on real stories from the real world. Also a template, and the last third of the book, that's really based on a lot of Marshall and my coaching experience about, 4 steps you can take to address any habit or behavior that gets in your way. So that practical, tactical aspect of the book is what's made it so coach friendly.
Oh, there's no doubt. And I certainly know we have given, because of your generosity and Marshall's, every single woman who comes into the EWA gets a copy of your book, and Marshall's too, as well as a couple of mine. And so they are well read for sure. So Sally, let's dive into some of the habits, because you have 12 distinct habits in your book. Which one do you want to choose to talk about? I want to talk about all of them, but we don't have time. So you tell me which one you want to start with.
Well, I think that one of the ones that's really foundational is expecting others to spontaneously notice and value your contributions. This is very common with women because they worry that they'll be perceived of as arrogant or all about me, or claiming credit away from other people if they talk about their achievements. So the default is to expect other people to notice. And this rarely happens because people are very busy and they're not necessarily noticing what they're contributing. And the problem with it is that, and I've seen this so many times, when you consistently go under-recognized, you begin to feel discouraged, you can detach, you can feel that you don't belong in a company or a job that in fact is exactly right for you because you're not recognized. So it's really important to have a plan in place for getting recognized, assuring that you are recognized for what you contribute.
Sally, that the counter of that is the way certainly I was brought up, and I think many women are, and that is don't show off, don't be boastful, don't toot your own horn, all of those things. Men perhaps were not brought up with quite the same admonition. So is that something common that you've seen?
It's very common, and it manifests all over the world and in different ways. And it's extremely complex in especially a lot of Asian cultures where there are real prohibitions on women talking about themselves in any way. One of the things that I find women find very helpful is working with them to talk about it in terms of what they have contributed rather than what they have achieved. So to use that language of contribution, because that then frames it in generosity, and it is a much more effective way of framing it, for one thing, but it's also a way of framing it that's more comfortable for many women who are ambivalent about appearing to be talking about themselves.
I love that. So contribution is how you contribute to the whole as well as to the smaller group. And that makes a huge difference. One of the challenges I've had, and I know it's common amongst our 70 EWA leaders, and they come from over 40 different industries and multiple cultures, is the whole process of rumination. In other words, we do something that isn't exactly the way we wish we'd done it. And then we spend the whole night wishing we'd done it differently and thinking about how we should have done something else. That's rumination in your book. You talk about the fact that cows ruminate, people shouldn't, but tell us a little bit about how to get out of that very self-destructive habit.
Yeah, rumination is one of the real killers because it keeps you stuck. One of the things that I know from having worked with a lot of ruminators, and research tells us that rumination is much more common among women than it is among men, for whatever reasons. We can go into that. But one of the things is we think that by really analyzing whatever it is, that will help us the next time. And in fact, that's not true at all. What it does is it keeps us stuck and can even spiral into depression. So every one of us who has this habit, and I work with so many women who do, we all need a practice that helps us to let go. Myself, I was working with Marshall once, and he missed a call with the CEO of the World Bank, and he found out while we were working, he looked up at me and he went, "Oh, well." And I thought, "Oh, well, are you kidding? If I missed that call, I'd be beating myself up for a week." And so when I got home, I had something that, I was upset about, and I put a big banner on my office wall that says, "Oh, well." And I have used that so many times. We need a reminder. We have great forgetters, all of us, and we need a reminder that it doesn't serve us to go over and over. Why did I do that? What was happening? I won't do it again. We need to find a way to let it go. Men move on. And it's one of the things I think that we can learn from men.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Move on, let go and move on. I think we should create a poster with Sally's name associated with that. I like it a lot. Sally, in your book, The Female Vision, which I think is the one book before the How Women Rise, you talk about some research, I think was done by others, but it was of MRIs that were done of women's brains and of men's brains, and they lit up in very different ways. Can you give us a little insight on that?
Certainly, that was fascinating. And that research was done in neuroscience labs at Yale and at UCLA. And it was really fascinating because what it showed is that men and women essentially notice differently. That is, when women's attention is engaged, lots of areas in their brains light up at the same time. When men's attention is engaged, one area tends to light up very strongly. In other words, women could be described as radar noticers, whereas men could be described as laser noticers. And this is really important because when we talk about vision, vision is composed of three elements. It's what you notice, it's what you value about what you notice, and how you tell a story or connect the dots about the importance of what you notice. So if we have a different noticing capacity, it's going to inform how we articulate what our vision is. So the book is really focused on very practical ways in which women can more effectively convey their vision to laser noticers, that is men.
Interesting. And that may have something to do with multi-processes as well. Oh. Yep. Sorry, go ahead on that. You were going to say something about multi-processing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's as if women's brains are multi-processing. It's probably one of the reasons that women can be skilled at multitasking, which has its negative and downside potentially, because it can involve us in a lot of distraction. But I think what's so important about it is that recognition that men are more laser-like noticers and that women are more radar-like noticers, whereas obviously it's not true in every case. We're human beings and individuals. It can really help us because often when we try to talk about something we believe is important as women, we're eager to supply the background or a lot of details, or let me tell you how I came up with this idea. Whereas men's more get to the bottom line focus can make it difficult for them to hear that. And they can perceive that as being kind of all over the map as opposed to really visionary, which it often is.
Yeah, that's so true. Just to our audience, if you want to send us in some comments and questions, I know that Sally would love to answer them. Before we take that, Sally, I do want to ask you one question, which has always been an issue that we've seen amongst our EWA leaders. They are outstanding, and many of them are perfectionists. In fact, they're almost perfect. And yet for some of them, that doesn't get them the CEO role. They may be COO, but they get passed over for CEO. Can you address that phenomenon?
Oh, absolutely, Lorraine. And you really tagged it, because perfectionism, I would say, is the most challenging and, in a way, the most toxic of the habits or behaviors at a senior level when you're aspiring to that C-suite position. And in my experience, when I have seen women who are enormously talented, who have either derailed or not been chosen for a position that you would expect they would be chosen for, it is often because they are viewed as a perfectionist. And perfectionists create a lot of stress. And if you're in a very high position, the stress you create goes out to a bigger circle. So I've seen that often. And it's really important to recognize that organizations often organizations tend to reward and promote women based on precision and correctness, where they tend to reward and promote men based on being perceived of as visionaries, having a great network, etc. So that really encourages women in this perfectionism, but then it gets in their way at senior levels.
This is such a critical point, because our mission is to get at least 250 women into the Fortune 500 CEO list. And so for women who are almost there, this is such critical information. So you have to show your fallibility. You have to show, how do you do that, Sally?
Well, you do that by really, I think, for one thing, prioritizing. I had an interesting thing in London. I was talking about perfectionism and using a sort of 80, 90, 100 rubric to decide, does this need to be done 100%? Does it need to be done 80%? And I tossed off a little comment and said, probably if you're a surgeon, it needs to be 100%. A woman came up to me afterwards and said, I'm the chief of surgeons at the Royal Ophthalmology Clinic down the road, and I can tell you that perfectionistic surgeons have the worst results. They terrify their teams. Teams don't make good decisions, and they're not flexible enough to take in new information. She said, so that doesn't apply there. So I think it's something we all need to think about. If we're perfectionists, we need to think, first of all, about the stress we're creating for ourselves and for the people around us, and have an awareness of that. And we also need to be able to do an assessment on everything of how completely it needs to be done, so that we learn to prioritize, and this creates less stress for others.
Very, very well said. We've got so many questions out there, Sally. I don't want to let you go because I've got so many of my own, but I really want our audience to participate. So let's get a couple up there. Our producer's telling me he's got at least a few. Oh, here's one from Judy Schrecker. She wants to know, do some women ruminate because they think they're trying to analyze an improvement plan, or they ruminate because they want to do it better next time? How do you distinguish between quality control and getting better and actually talking yourself into a hole?
I think quality control and getting better is very behavioral, and it also involves engaging other people, which is why peer mentoring, like you do, is so important. Peer coaching, all these practices are great. So when you have something that you want to really make an improvement on, the best thing to do is immediately to engage somebody else. The worst thing to do is stay stuck in your head and think, if I just give this a little more time, I can really figure it out, because that will keep you stuck. So I think substituting, engaging another person to help you, as opposed to going down the rabbit hole alone, is probably the most effective thing you can do.
Oh, that's great. Well, I know we have other questions, but let's take one more for a moment and then we'll continue. I believe that there is so much to learn here, Sally, and you have lots and lots of insights. So while we're getting the question written up there, many women, oh, there it is, Pamela from Scranton, Pennsylvania. In choosing a mentor, is it more valuable to seek out another female, or is it mentorship from a male that is as effective or even more effective? What do you think, Sally?
I think it really depends on the situation in the relationship, how you are looking to benefit. I think having a female mentor can be an extremely powerful and rewarding experience, and that you can pass on that experience to others. Myself, having come up in the 70s and 80s, all my mentors were male. There just weren't women around doing what I was doing. So I gained enormous benefit from that, and lessons that I learned stick with me every day. So I would say, think through, what do you intend to achieve? What are you trying to get better at? What are you trying to let go of? What position are you trying to achieve? And who's going to be the most effective in helping you do that? I think that's your first question.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, at EWA, we talk about not applauding with one hand. You have to applaud with two. And so, a multi-gender, diverse, highly complex, cross-cultural workplace is what all of us are working in now. We have to learn a lot of new habits. And so one of the other habits, Sally, that we have seen across EWA is multi-generational mentoring. We have women in their mid-30s all the way through to their 70s. We have corporate women as well as entrepreneurs. So I'm interested, is there a difference in the habits that you see amongst, for example, Generation Z or millennials versus baby boomers?
Well, yes, definitely. And I think that many of them are just age and level related. What I see with the younger women, however you want to define that generation, is much more comfort claiming their achievements and asking for what they want. What I see getting in the way of the younger women are some of the communication habits in the book, too much, minimizing, etc. So those are more likely, at a senior level, women are more likely to have worked out the communication habits, but be undermined by perfectionism, by sometimes the disease to please, and sometimes overvaluing expertise. So they can be a bit different in that way.
Yeah, you know what? There's another side to this coin, and many of our women leaders at EWA have seen this in the workplace. Amongst some generations, and I'm not going to target any because I think it's in every generation, for some there is a sense of entitlement that we deserve. What are your thoughts on that, Sally?
Well, I hear lots of women my age complaining about the entitled younger generation, but we're the ones who taught them that the world was their oyster. And that was a good thing. And I see, the confidence, that bedrock confidence that I'm here to make a difference. I have things that I can contribute to be a positive. And some of the rough edges on that will probably get dealt with over time, because every career path has its setbacks and its rockiness, and we all learn to deal with it. But I think that the confidence that I see in the younger generation, especially when I go out to Silicon Valley and everybody looks like they're 28 or 30, is just a great gift to the world, in my view.
Yes, I would agree with you. I think there's flexibility, there's novelty, there's social awareness. There are a lot of things that our generation didn't have time for because we were fighting wars or trying to survive in other ways. So I think this is a wonderful, sort of on the Maslow chart, very much at the self-actualization level, which is a miracle and a tremendous gift for them to have and for us to enjoy as well. So, Sally, when you think about this whole COVID situation we've been in, so much has changed, not only in affecting everybody's career, but certainly women's careers, and even more so women with children who have the primary caregiver role, and single women, and then women of color. And then it's sort of cascaded into multiple segments of our economy. What has surprised you most with your background in women's leadership during this period of 10 months?
What has surprised me most has been how quickly organizations that have been absolutely resistant to any ideas of working from home, of flexible working hours, have changed. It has been remarkable. I have had organizations that have had really struggled to attract women because they were so resistant to the idea of ever letting women work at home when they had a sick child, a snow day, whatever. And those have crumbled overnight, and I don't see it going back. And in the conversations I have with the senior HR people at a variety and range of companies, and I'm talking about around the world, global companies, they don't see it going back. So I think that's ultimately good news for women. It's important to separate out what is particular and incredibly challenging about the pandemic, which is schools being closed and not having the ability to have other people in the house who can help with children, whether they're relatives, neighbors, or paid help. That is problematic, and that has been a terrible situation for many women. But I think the long-term impact here is going to be hugely positive.
And I agree with you in the fact that a lot of men have stepped up as well. And there are many men whose wives may have the primary career who have decided either they've been involuntarily terminated or they've decided that taking care of the children should be their primary role. And more power to them. I think that's an amazing event that's happened out of this COVID situation. So you mentioned globally, Sally, and obviously cultures are so different and the position of women around the world is so different. What is it that you have found to be consistent worldwide and what is very different? You mentioned Asia. Was there anything else?
Oh, the biggest thing I have learned in the 30 years that I've been doing this work is how remarkably consistent women's challenges are and women's gifts are. That is extraordinary. When I went to Japan, the most common, with How Women Rise, the most common comment I got was, oh, we thought these behaviors and habits were just Japanese women. We didn't know other women have them. So I'm constantly amazed by how consistent globally these issues are for women. Now, the solutions are often quite different. In many Asian cultures, there's a real prohibition on talking about your achievements. And the way men work around that is through their networks. They have other people represent them, and that's harder for women. So the way around there in those cultures is building up a network, which is going to be different than in cultures where there's less reluctance to do that.
Yeah. Sally, we have only a few minutes left, but there's one issue that I see quite often, and women who come into our network and say, even though they're quite senior, I feel so stuck. I feel like I don't know how to get out of where I'm at. And if people look from the outside, they say how successful you are, but inside, I don't feel that way. I feel stuck. What is your advice?
Well, two different things. Stuck means something is getting in your way. So what you want to do, again, it's not effective to do behavioral change alone. You want to reach out to someone and try to get a handle on what it is that's keeping you stuck so that you can address that very clearly. The other feeling that you're expressing kind of has to do with the imposter syndrome, where you're not feeling like, is this really me? And I always say if you've got the imposter syndrome, if you're wondering yourself, is this really me? Is what I'm manifesting really me? Just go with it. Just fake it till you make it. Inhabit the confidence that you feel would be ideal for you. Inhabit who the world is telling you that you are and accept it.
Yes, I love that. Fake it till you make it. And most women don't have to fake it because they are already leading and doing a phenomenal job. They just don't necessarily believe in themselves. So I love that. Sally, I wish we had a whole day with you. And I think you'll have to come back because there are so many more questions from our audience we didn't get to. My apologies, everybody. But thank you, Sally, for your time and your talent and your amazing insights. You are truly a guru in the area of women's leadership. Thank you. And next time, we will be featuring our very own Exceptional Women Awardees, not just amazing thought leaders, but our own EWAs. We will have a very special show on Martin Luther King's Day and be featuring Melanie Williams, former president of Verizon for Florida, and now the senior vice president of Frontier Communications. Along with Melanie will be Melissa Ning Goldner. Melissa is a principal at Slalom Consulting, former transformation partner, leader at Ogilvy and Mather. They are both spectacular women who are going to give us their life stories as well as enormous insights on diversity, inclusion, and equity. And so I will leave you today with a challenge. Do you feel stuck in your career? And if so, what are you doing about it? Please, will you like and comment and share our show, and any of the comments that are made, make your own too. And of course, give us your answer to the question on our website or to my email address, which is going to be on the screen for you. Thank you so much for joining us. It was truly an amazing show. See you next time.